Welcome, everybody, and thanks for being here today. Thank you, Wendy, for putting on this amazing event. It's such an honor to be here and to be with you guys today. So yeah, let's kick it off. I mean, we are at the UN today in the financial capital of the world, New York City. And I think here, especially when you talk about Bitcoin or you hear about Bitcoin, it really is thought of as a speculative asset, right? But you go other places in the world, and it actually becomes much more than that. It becomes a vehicle for getting access to savings, getting access to credit, getting access to financial autonomy. And that's what we're going to explore on this panel today. And I'm excited to kick it over to Wendy, because she has a really cool story about how she got exposed to Bitcoin back in 2014. It was through a female goat farmer, I believe. And I want you to tell the audience how that opened your eyes to how Bitcoin is expanding access to people in underserved countries who are not banked or underbanked. Can you tell us what that taught you?
Yeah. So if people have been here before, you kind of know this story. But, you know, my background is not financial. My background is not technical at all. It's been impacted my whole entire life. And what happened, because of launching Women's Entrepreneurship Day organization, and we partnered with the State Department, we launched in over 144 countries. And I ended up meeting this woman in Botswana who was a goat farmer. And in 2011, her son got really sick, and she was trying any way she could to figure out how to pay for health care. And what happened was she learned about Bitcoin. And unfortunately, her son passed away and decided to take her one-room hut, literally the one-room hut as a goat farmer in Botswana she lived in, and turned it into the Satoshi Center and was teaching all these farmers about Bitcoin. And what it brought to me was like, wow, you know, I was like thinking about this for a minute, and I was thinking, wow, here's this technology that's actually going to enable people like her to actually be part of the financial ecosystem, right? Because this woman was making maybe $1 a day, right? And what you see, like in a lot of these countries, what I realize is, wow, you know, the founders of Bitcoin, they didn't care about fame, money, or power, right? Because they created a fake name, so no one knows who they are, right? So they have no fame. And then they have no power because no one knows who they are, right? And they made Bitcoin traceable, transparent, immutable, and only created 21 million, right? So it can never be deflated. And in countries like Botswana, their inflation is like 10,000 a day. You know, it's like crazy, and like Venezuela and et cetera. So that's what for me, that was like super impactful, because creating this foundation, I learned that 388 million women and girls were living in poverty, and 1 out of 8 women in America live in poverty. I was thinking, wow, you know, this is something I really want to learn about. And so that's what brought me back to New York and went through that rabbit hole of being in this ecosystem.
Muneeb, we were talking backstage just now, and we're talking about how Bitcoin is viewed today largely as not just a peer-to-peer transfer of money or wealth. It's also a store of value, akin to digital gold. Larry Fink, the CEO of BlackRock, likes to call it digital gold. He's all in on Bitcoin at this point, which kind of tells you how far we've come in the last 10 years. But can you kind of explain, from your point of view, how Bitcoin is a savings vehicle, and kind of what Wendy said with that 21 million, how it is a hedge against inflation, because really you can't print any more. It's not like the US dollar where you can kind of print infinite amounts.
Yes, so I think the way to think about this is Bitcoin can be a complicated technology. It can sort of like, throw a lot of people off. My background is in technology. I did a PhD in computer science at Princeton, and that's where I discovered Bitcoin. But I think the beauty of it is that you can almost ignore the inner complications of Bitcoin and simply view it as a way for storing wealth digitally, right? The best analogy is gold. People understand gold. It's been around for thousands of years. But think of like what would be a digital version of gold look like, right? So it's simply a store of value, and it's very easily portable, very easily you can transfer it. Like it's hard to put a lot of gold bars in your bag and like try to take it somewhere, or do accounting for it, really verify exactly how much you have. Bitcoin is like very transparent, very neutral. And it's a really good store of value because it's at a early stage of adoption. A lot of people sort of like get scared by the volatility of Bitcoin. When I started like around 13 years ago or something, there was one explanation that sort of stuck with me, that the price of Bitcoin is just a technology adoption curve, right? So the more people who use it around the world, because the supply is fixed, it will get reflected in the price. And I've seen Bitcoin go from like $70 to 100 to 1,000 to 10,000 to 100,000, and that is just a technology adoption curve. Like still, I think there are billions of people out there who still don't know about what it is, how it's a saving technology, and I think we are at a very, very early stage still. Like we're only around 6-7% of the gold market cap, and I think digital gold is going to be better than real gold, just like email is better than paper mail, or electronic communication is better than sort of like, trying to use other forms.
Shawn, you've been in Bitcoin, or you've been an advocate. I'm not sure if you bought into it in 2014, or 2011, I'm sorry, 2011. But you started Salt.
He's buying lunch.
He's buying in 2016, I believe. And that was to give access to capital to people who wanted to borrow against their Bitcoin. Can you explain why that was the business model that you chose, and why that is important, why it's still important, frankly?
Yeah, so if you think about savings technology and just savings in general, as the first thing you have to do, everybody's born with nothing and then has to earn something, and then you want to earn and save that hard-earned wealth somewhere where you know it's going to be protected. Bitcoin is definitely the best technology that's ever been invented for this. It's by far, in a way, the best, and it can get detailed and complicated. It's almost better not to try to learn too much about it at the beginning, just get some and hold on to it. But in the early days, you could really buy and sell, and that was about all you could do. And I would watch, myself included, everybody that would want to go participate and be active in the space. And there was really no way to have a bridge to get to where we would need to be with credit markets. And Bitcoin, by default, is inclusive. And when you think about access and financial empowerment, you need inclusion. Everybody should have a fair shake at it. And I think that's what really caught me about Wendy's story here, and just what everybody stands for when you're supporting entrepreneurs and women, is that everybody has to have a seat at that table if it's financial inclusion. And building on top of that, there was, well, how are we going to get there? Maybe someday we do have this as a currency, but we're going to need some bridge to get from this new, gold shiny light on the hill that we think might be possible, and the current system we have, which has gotten us where we are now. And the only real way to think about that was that you need to be able to borrow against it. And so the saying is that I really like is, if you have Bitcoin, you have credit, and it's permission to everybody by default. And by having it, you have something that nobody can take away. It's just a beautiful technology.
So if I don't have a credit score, because can you talk a little bit about, historically, women have not been as, they haven't had access to credit scores in the same way that men have. Maybe just haven't had access to like property, maybe haven't had the same access to credit cards and that kind of thing. Maybe in underserved countries, underserved communities. So it's a little bit harder for women to be able to go to a bank and say, hey, I need a credit loan for, to start a business. But if they have Bitcoin, they're able to come to you and say, hey, like, here's my Bitcoin. That's all the collateral they need. And you will say, hey, that's all I need, and you can give them a loan basically based on that. Is that correct?
Yeah, there's two things there. So one, credit scores are intended well, right? The idea is to learn how to have repayment and how to earn credit towards being good at making your payments. But it introduces this asking for permission and earning your way in. It incentivizes some bad habits, actually, by early on, many people become in debt because they're trying to earn a credit. And if you think about it, when you introduce somebody that you have to go get permission from, unfortunately, bad actors can take advantage of those situations, and their discrimination can occur, and it becomes subjective. And the beautiful part about having something programmable that is audited by everybody and accessible by everybody is that you don't have that. It's not possible because it's objective, and it's the same for everybody. Bitcoin doesn't care if you're a man or a woman. It just is what it is, and it works. And so this just removes that paradigm, and it changes to one where you must save first, and that you must be responsible for your finance first, and it doesn't matter who you are. So it does remove a lot of problems with fraud and with abuse, and I think that's relevant to everybody here.
Wendy, you work with women in over 140 countries, I believe, and you work with entrepreneurs on the ground. Where are you seeing Bitcoin helping women, sort of like in real world situations, kind of help break barriers down for entrepreneurs?
Well, in America, we have the U.S. dollar, which is pretty much the most stable currency, right, and the global currency. And so, we don't need it here, right? But what I've seen a lot, like just in entrepreneurship in America with a certain group that is, very much accepting, these new technologies, including Bitcoin and AI at the beginning and et cetera, is using Bitcoin actually as collateral. Like, people don't really realize, that the technology blocked, so there's a difference between Bitcoin and crypto, right? Bitcoin is the only decentralized currency of all currencies in the world. There's no other currency in the world that is decentralized. That means nobody is in control of it, right? It's just the people's currency, right? So I think, when you think about, when I think about this whole thing, I think it's about, when you're going to get a mortgage, it takes 30 days, notary republics, lawyers and all these things, right? And if you're going to get a mortgage or a loan, you have so much in traditional finance, you have so much to deal with. It's kooky. And it takes like a month or 6 weeks to even get that loan after you do all the work, right? But what Bitcoin is on the blockchain, right? And what happens when you know this more than anybody, right? Is that it literally can take 1 hour to use your Bitcoin as collateral. Is that correct? What do you guys do with salt lending?
Yeah, that's correct.
Yeah.
And the thing that I think most people don't really recognize there is just that it's extremely cumbersome to do all that manual work with humans at bank branches and across the board doing redundant triple entry book accounting. It's just not efficient. And so you can measure Bitcoin any way you want to, and a lot of times people will give it a lot of gruff against having maybe high energy cost. But the truth is it's settling sometimes near instant on second layers like what Stacks does, speeding up the transaction cost for these transactions. And even if you're to go to the upper limit, let's say 10 minutes or something, 10 minutes to settle a transaction that could take 90 days on a credit card rail, and then the accounting being done in final is going to outcompete no matter what. It's just simply faster and better. And collateral is a great use case because everybody has to have that if you're going to save. If you save, that's going to become collateral.
Muneeb, can you talk about the difference between Bitcoin as a savings mechanism and then payment stablecoins as what they were? Because I feel like the original use case for Bitcoin was probably what stablecoins are today, like a peer-to-peer, transfer of money, right? And now we're seeing that come along with stablecoins. We're hearing every day, some major financial institution is getting in on stablecoins. Can you just kind of break down what the difference is between the two? And I guess for our audience members who aren't familiar, what they need to know?
Yeah, so I think just like I described Bitcoin as almost like a digital version of gold, people also created digital versions of just the US dollar, right? So there are companies out there like Tether, they have this thing called USDT, and it's really just like Bitcoin is represented without getting into the technology too much, like on a blockchain, and it represents digital gold in a way. But this thing represents real dollars and is backed by real dollars as well. So there are dollars sitting in a bank account of this company, and they've issued this digital representation of that dollar. And you would think that, that what's the big deal with that? Well, it is a really, really big deal because now you have this almost new financial infrastructure that's global, and people don't have to go through banks anymore. You can just set up your own wallet, and you can get access to digital dollars. And this is taking off in a massive way around the world. I think around $160 billion of supply sits in literally just one company, Tether. I think they're the seventh largest buyer of US Treasury bills at this time. One of the most profitable companies on the planet right now, by the way. I think they had $13 billion of profit last year. And it's like a 30-person team. And why is there so much demand for it? Well, the reason is actually very similar to why people feel that things are always getting more and more expensive, right? So if you're in a country where your local currency is actually losing value against the dollar, you don't want to save money in the local currency, right? So if you're in Turkey or if you're in Pakistan, where I was born, people actually don't want to save in the local currency because they all understand that this thing is just going to lose value. So the dollar to them is a much more stable form of storing wealth, and that's why these technologies are taking off. Interestingly, in the US, and this takes a little bit more time to sort of like, have the right mental model for it, over here, we also feel that things are getting more expensive, right? When you go to the grocery store, the price of meat is going up, or eggs, or whatever it might be. We feel it. We know the name is inflation, but it's something doesn't quite add up. But it's the same concept. Dollar is just losing value, and you need a better store of wealth, which is Bitcoin. So interestingly, if you plot like the value of Bitcoin as like the stable thing, dollar is actually losing value against it. Similarly, if you plot dollars versus other currencies are just losing value against the dollar.
Very well articulated. What would you say is the biggest barrier to Bitcoin, or let's stick with Bitcoin adoption for women, for people who, can get access to this technology, but is it education? Is it regulation? Is it something else? What would you say is probably the main driver of bottlenecking?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I would say that we need to sort of like kill these stereotypes that if it's something like a complicated technology, women are not going to learn about it, or and so on, right? So I think we need to like just put that aside. Yes, it can be a little bit of a complicated technology, but it is a complicated technology for everybody, right? There was a recent example where someone in our circles was getting divorced, and that guy's done pretty well for himself. And a friend was asking, how did the settlement happen? And he's like, well, I kept all the Bitcoin and gave up all of the houses. And that sort of like stuck with me, that in a way there's like information asymmetry, that the party on the other side, she probably felt like, the houses are real, like, it's real property, I'm going to get those. But he was feeling that I made the right trade because Bitcoin is going to be far more valuable. And I think that shouldn't exist, right? So I think it's an information gap. And I think there needs to be a lot more effort to sort of like fill that information gap, that why is Bitcoin valuable? Everyone should have like the right access to information. And I think events like these are actually doing a huge service to it.
What would you say, Wendy?
Well, first of all, I think it's education, right? Like, I think, we all know AI. I'm sure everybody in this room uses AI, right? And Bitcoin is still in puberty. Like, it's still really young, you know what I mean? And when you think about it, Gen Z, millennials, alphas, the new ones, whatever the next one is, they grew up on their phones, right? They're not going to be carrying bars of gold, right, around with them. And that's why I feel like we need to really educate everybody, because I feel like the more you understand and you go down and really understand, why was Bitcoin created? What is Bitcoin? Who are the founders? No one knows who the founders are. But, and really understand what it is doing to make a huge impact in this world, and to enable literally millions of people in Zimbabwe, Botswana, Nigeria, Venezuela, Argentina, an opportunity to actually they are transacting daily on this. Like, so you have millions of people using Bitcoin every single day as a currency all around the world that live in high inflation communities.
And Shawn, take us home.
I actually think that learning by practice is the best advice here. You can buy amount of Starbucks in Bitcoin. You don't have to make a large investment, and you will learn so much by just having something in your wallet and watching it for a while with very little risk. And the problem with the information, and I agree with everything you said, and you can go ask AI and it'll probably tell you Bitcoin's a great idea. But I think the problem is there's been just so much news, and a lot of it's not great. And there haven't been marketing agents trying to figure out the right way to communicate this necessarily. It's been very grassroots and organic, and so there's a lot of bad terms, there's a lot of noise, there's a lot of bad information, and then there's all these other companies and other coins that have been out there called crypto, and that can get confused a lot with Bitcoin. And at the end of the day, I think the best success I've had with actually getting people onboarded is just helping them buy $5 and then you have it and you start thinking about it, and as you get comfortable with, oh, that was pretty easy, and it's going up in value, what's going on there, it becomes a lot less that you have to learn about. It's a fascinating topic. I've been studying now for almost 15 years, and I still feel like I know less every day when I meet other smarter people. And so I think going down that rabbit hole is only for people who really want to learn everything about it, and there are great resources, but the easiest thing is just to have some and get started that way.
Awesome. Well, give it up for these three amazing panelists, please. Thank you.